Welcome to Horror in Detail. Are you ready to embark on a chilling journey into the realms of darkness? The mysterious and the bone-chilling world of horror stories. On this channel, we are dedicated to unraveling the most terrifying tales that will send shivers down your spine. First story. Title: Frozen Whispers. The air was thick with tension as a group of friends embarked on a camping trip deep into the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. Excitement and laughter echoed through the dense forest as they set up their tents near the edge of a crystal-clear lake. Little did they know, an ancient evil lurked in the shadows, waiting to unleash its icy grip on their souls. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature plummeted, and an unnatural chill settled over the campsite. The crackling of the campfire couldn't drown out the eerie silence that surrounded them. An unease settled in the air, and the friends exchanged nervous glances. That night, as they huddled in their tents, strange sounds echoed through the woods. Twigs snapped, and the wind carried whispers that seemed to dance on the edge of human understanding. The bravest among them, Mark, decided to investigate, armed only with a flashlight and his curiosity. Venturing into the darkness, Mark felt an otherworldly presence closing in. The trees seemed to twist and contort, casting long, shadowy fingers that reached for him. The air grew colder with every step, and he could see his breath in the frosty night. Suddenly, the whispers intensified, forming words that echoed in his mind. "Hungry," they hissed, sending shivers down his spine. Mark's heart raced as he stumbled upon an ancient totem, adorned with grotesque carvings depicting a creature with antlers and sunken, malevolent eyes. He recoiled in horror, realizing the legends were true. A Wendigo, a spirit cursed by cannibalism, haunted these woods. Ignoring the warning signs, Mark hurried back to the camp, desperate to share his discovery. But the others dismissed his tale as a mere campfire story, unwilling to believe in the supernatural. As the night wore on, the temperature plummeted further. Strange footprints appeared in the snow around the camp, leading to a growing sense of dread. The friends huddled together, their breath visible in the frigid air. The once warm and welcoming campfire struggled against the encroaching cold. Whispers echoed through the darkness, and the friends heard their names carried on the icy wind. Paranoia set in, turning friend against friend. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, and the forest seemed to come alive with malevolence. One by one, the friends disappeared into the night, drawn away by an unseen force. Panic consumed the remaining few as they realized the Wendigo was picking them off, one soul at a time. Each disappearance left behind a chilling void, as if the forest itself hungered for their essence. In a final desperate attempt to escape, the survivors decided to flee the cursed campsite. As they stumbled through the snow-covered terrain, the Wendigo's haunting whispers followed them, promising a fate worse than death. Exhausted and on the brink of madness, they stumbled upon an ancient burial ground, marked by weathered stones and eerie symbols. It became clear that the Wendigo was tied to the land, its curse deeply rooted in the forgotten past. The survivors faced a choice: confront the malevolent spirit or succumb to the frozen abyss closing in around them. Summoning every ounce of courage, they performed a desperate ritual, using the ancient stones to create a barrier against the Wendigo's insidious influence. As they chanted ancient incantations, the air crackled with energy, and the forest itself seemed to recoil. The whispers faded, and the temperature gradually rose, dispelling the bone-chilling cold. With the curse broken, the survivors emerged from the woods, scarred by the horrors they witnessed. The Wendigo's haunting whispers lingered in their memories, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between the natural and supernatural worlds. The friends vowed never to speak of that night again, but the frozen whispers of the Wendigo would forever echo in the depths of their nightmares. Second story. This story was shared by you/non_Luna. My terrifying encounter with a Canadian legend. Spoiler alert, it's not just a legend. Growing up in the remote wilderness of northern Canada, I always heard stories of the Wendigo. My grandfather told me tales of a creature so terrifying that even the bravest of men trembled at the mere mention of its name. but I never truly believed in the legend until one dark, snowy night. The whistling started faintly at first, like a haunting tune carried on the frigid wind, but it grew louder and more insistent, like it was calling out to me personally. I tried to ignore it and kept hiking, but the whistling persisted, creeping closer and closer until I couldn't ignore it any longer. I peered into the darkness beside me and saw a figure standing in the woods. It was tall and thin, with skin stretched tightly over its bones, and its eyes glowed gray with a fierce hunger. I knew instantly what it was, the Wendigo. The instant I noticed it in the woods, it stopped whistling for a moment and twisted its head like it was intrigued that I had given in to its call. It began to whistle again, a melody so haunting that it seemed to penetrate my very soul. It was like it was trying to hypnotize me, to lure me into the woods where it could claim me for its own. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move as it began to creep closer and closer. Its claws and teeth gleamed in the moonlight, and I knew that if it reached me, it would be the end. I turned to continue hiking. I just needed to get back to my cabin, I told myself. But then, it started snarling. The whistling faltered for just a moment as I heard its footsteps thumping through the woods. I grabbed the knife my grandfather gave me as a boy from my bag, ready to strike. When my grandfather gave me this knife, he told me to always keep it close because it might just save my life one day. As soon as I heard the Wendigo break through the tree line, I threw it with all my might. It hit the creature square in the chest, and it let out a blood-curdling scream. It writhed in agony as I watched, frozen with terror. But then, to my horror, it began to change. Its skin began to peel away in strips, revealing a twisted and gnarled form underneath. Its limbs elongated and twisted into new shapes, its jaws unhinged to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was transforming into something even more monstrous than before. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the Wendigo behind me, its ragged breaths and pounding footsteps echoing through the trees. I struggled with all my might to get away, my feet slipping and sliding on the snow and ice. Just as I thought I wouldn't be able to escape, I heard a branch snap behind me. I didn't dare look back, but I felt in my stomach that the creature was still close behind. I pushed myself harder, running as fast as I could. I could see the lights of my cabin in the distance, a beacon of safety in the darkness. With a final burst of adrenaline, I threw myself through the door of my cabin and slammed it shut behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath and shaking with fear. I could hear the Wendigo outside, snarling and whistling. But my grandfather always told me they couldn't come inside as long as I kept the door locked. I stayed there for what felt like hours, too scared to move. But eventually, the snarling and whistling stopped, and I knew that the creature had moved on. I didn't manage to sleep that night, but hours after the sun came up, I carefully opened the door and went back outside and into the woods. I followed my own footsteps in the snow. The Wendigo's nowhere to be seen, as if it hadn't been stomping into the ground with what sounded like an earth-shattering force. About halfway to where I thought I had first seen the Wendigo, I found a tree, mangled, split in half, and laid out diagonally across the path. I realized this tree was how I was able to get away. Then I thought back to what my grandfather said about the knife. Maybe the knife made the tree get in the way. Maybe not. Either way, I never forgot that night. For years after that night, I lived in constant fear of the Wendigo's return. Every time the wind whistled through the trees, or a stray twig snapped in the woods, I would freeze, waiting for the sound of that haunting melody. Third story. This story was shared by you/Fisherman Tales. The Man in the Woods. The cabin was small and hidden deep within the woods, far from any road. It had a wood shingle exterior, one door, one curtain window, and a metal stovepipe sticking out from the roof. Along the side was a rack of logs and a stump with an axe stuck in it. On the other side was a line for hanging clothes. Think it's abandoned? I whispered. Justin shook his head. Nature ain't taken it yet. What do you mean? You ain't ever noticed that when people leave a place, nature moves in? All those plants in green that show up. Oh, yeah. like the old church. Just like that. And it don't take long, neither. Why does nature wait for people to leave? It don't wait, Cole. Nature's always trying to take over, but people won't let it. It's like a war or an invasion, one that never ends. Nature was here first, though. So, that means we're the invaders. We ain't been given a choice. Well, we could at least be nicer. Justin was quiet for a moment, then said, "Let's get a closer look at that house." We crept through crunching leaves, stopping every few steps to listen, then continued forward until we reached the side of the house. "What if they have a gun?" I asked. "Everyone has a gun out here." "Yeah, but what if they use it on us? We're just kids. They ain't gonna shoot a couple of kids. People have killed kids before. You worry too much. If they pull a gun on us, we'll run. Ain't nobody faster than us. We ain't faster than bullets." Justin peeked around to the front of the cabin and said, "I'm gonna try the door." "Wait, keep an eye out." Before I could say no, Justin rounded the corner and was at the door. I watched the surrounding woods for movement. With each passing second, I felt as if the homeowner was coming closer, but I was too anxious to tell if nothing was moving or if everything was. It was as if some invisible force were charging toward us. "Cole," Justin whispered, startling me. He was peeking around the corner, waving me over. "It's unlocked." I hurried to him, and we stepped through the open door into a small, tidy space. There was a neatly made twin-sized bed and a deerskin rug spread across the wooden floor. On the right side of the room was a wood stove with a pot on top, with a shelf above it that held various jarred herbs and spices. On the left of the room was a bookshelf holding about a dozen books, and next to that a wooden chest. "Wow," I said. "This is awesome. Let's see what's in that chest," Justin said, and knelt and opened it. He rummaged through, pulling out various clothes until it was empty. "Nothing good." "Check out these books," I said. Justin closed the chest, then looked over my shoulder as I pulled out books on gardening, hunting, bushcraft, and taxidermy. "What's this one?" Justin said, reaching past to grab a book with a blank leather cover. "Is it a Bible?" "It's my journal," a deep voice announced from behind us, startling us against the bookshelf, causing several books to get knocked over onto the floor. The man was tall and looked to be in his mid-40s. He was clean-shaven and didn't look much like the sort of person you'd expect to find living hidden in the woods. "Sorry," Justin said and held out the journal, and as he did so, a photograph of a young boy fell out. The man reached down and picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then took the journal from Justin and placed the photo inside. "My son," the man said. He stepped toward us, and we moved out of the way as he placed the journal back onto the shelf, then knelt to pick up the rest of the books. "Sorry, sir," I said, and helped him pick up the books. Justin did the same, then the man took the books from us and returned them to their shelves. "What are your names?" the man asked. We introduced ourselves, and he told us his name was Henry, then asked, "Is this the first time you've seen my cabin?" "Yes, sir," we answered. "Nobody else knows about it?" Justin and I looked at each other, then back at Henry, and shrugged. "We ain't ever heard anyone mention it," Justin said. Henry looked at us a moment, then nodded. "Okay, don't tell anyone." He walked over to a bucket of water he must have brought inside with him and dumped some of it into the pot that sat atop the stove. Then he stepped outside. "We should go," I whispered. "Okay," Justin answered. We hurried to the doorway, and right as we reached it, Henry was there holding a rifle and a log. He looked at us a moment, then we moved out of the way so he could pass. He stepped through and leaned the rifle against the wall and placed the log into the stove. "I'm going to make rabbit stew," he said, and began to make a fire. "You're welcome to join." "We need to get back home," I said. Justin hesitated, though, and asked, "Why you out here?" With the fire going, the man shut the hatch and stood and faced us. "Because I want to be." "Are you alone?" The man nodded. "What about your son?" I asked. The man looked at me, then his eyes fell to his feet, and he said, "He's dead." Oh, sorry. How'd he die? Justin asked. The man looked back up. He was sick. Where's his mom? The man shrugged. I don't know. We aren't together anymore. The water was beginning to boil. The man turned to it and began putting in different herbs and spices. Will one of you grab the rabbit from the stump outside? He asked. Justin stepped outside and Henry glanced over at me and said, Go grab some vegetables from the garden out back. Which ones? Whichever ones you like. Justin and I met on my way to the garden, and he said, He doesn't seem so bad. I don't know. What if he's some sort of outlaw? Justin grinned. Maybe he's a bank robber. Or a murderer. Justin held up the skinned rabbit. This one might agree with you. Then he laughed and headed into the cabin. At the garden, I hadn't the faintest idea what I was looking at. Everything looked like weeds, aside from the tomatoes and peppers. So that's what I grabbed. Here you go, I said as I stepped back inside and handed Henry the veggies. No potatoes or carrots? He asked. I didn't see any. They're under the soil. Oh. Henry smirked and took the tomatoes and peppers from me and said, Well, let's see how Cole's stew turns out. That evening, we sat around the cabin and ate the spiciest rabbit stew I'd ever had. For a second there, I'd even thought we'd been poisoned. But Henry just laughed and said I'd picked something called a habanero pepper. What kind of psycho eats this stuff? Justin said as he gulped down a second cup of water. Sorry, boys, Henry laughed. I should have warned you. He stood and grabbed another jar and said, Try this. It might help cool you off. What is it? I asked. Honey. I was desperate, so I quickly took the jar and stuck a spoonful in my mouth, and sure enough, it seemed to help. Justin snagged it from me and did the same, and before long, we'd cleaned out that entire jar of honey. Look at y'all, a couple of Pooh Bears, Henry joked. Sorry, I apologized. I'll get you more. I appreciate that, Cole. Henry stood and took our dishes from us. It's getting dark. You boys better head home. We agreed and thanked him for the honey, and I apologized for ruining the rabbit stew. Henry shrugged and said, I liked it. Might make more for myself sometime. That next morning, I was up in my room when I heard a commotion coming from across the street. Justin and his dad were shouting at each other, and shortly thereafter, Justin came storming outside. I quickly opened my window and hollered for him, and he looked up at me and said, Let's get the hell out of here, Cole. I put on my shoes and hurried down the stairs and past my mom and sister, who were sitting on the couch watching the morning show. Where you off to? Mom asked. Gonna go hang out with Justin. Be home before dark this time. I will. I mean it. Justin was waiting for me outside. We bumped fists, and he said, Let's go see what Henry's doing. Right now. You got anything better to do? I shrugged. No, I guess not. Hold on a second. I hurried back inside and into the kitchen and grabbed one of those bottles of honey that's shaped like a bear, then ran out the door again as my mom said, Hey, were you taking my honey? I looked at Justin and yelled, Run, and we took off for the woods. As we walked through the woods, Justin went on about what an asshole his dad was and how life would be better if it were just him and his mom. I wasn't so sure if it would be better or just another kind of awful, considering his mom was a useless alcoholic. But at least she didn't hit him. She wasn't always a drunk, you know? Justin said, That's why I wear this necklace. It was a shark tooth necklace I'd never seen Justin without for as long as I knew him. Nothing impressive. You can find one in any beach gift shop. They weren't together for a while. My mom and dad, Justin continued. They'd broken up. Before you knew me. Mom and I were happy back then. We went to the beach one day, and she bought me this. We couldn't afford much, you know? But we didn't need much. Or at least I didn't think so. Why'd they get back together? Mom thought we needed more, and Dad could afford it. He's the only reason we're in that house. I guess that ain't all bad. We wouldn't be friends if you weren't in that house. Justin smiled and patted me on the back. You're right, Cole. But never knowing someone is okay. Losing someone you knew is what's hard. Henry was sitting in the doorway reading a book when we arrived. Back so soon. Brought you some honey, I said. Henry held out his hand, and I tossed it to him. He looked at it and smiled. Thank you, Cole. What are you reading? Justin asked. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Ever heard of it? Justin shook his head. I'm not much of a reader. Henry looked at me and I shook my head as well. What's it about? I asked. It's about two friends, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. They get into a bunch of trouble and go on adventures and such. It's sort of a kid's book. Henry closed the book. I started reading it again because you two remind me of the main characters. Cole, you're like Tom, and Justin here is like Huckleberry. What kind of name is Huckleberry? Justin asked. Henry shrugged. Same could be said about Justin, or Cole, or even Henry. What kind of name is any name, really? We hadn't a clue, and noticing he confused us, Henry laughed and said, So, what can I do for you boys today? I guess we're just looking for something to do. Henry put the book down and scratched at his chin. Y'all know how to chop logs? On that day, Henry taught us how to chop logs and start a fire, and over the next couple of years we'd sneak off a few days each week and bring Henry food and supplies in exchange for lessons in self-sufficiency. He taught us things like how to work with wood, garden, hunt, skin an animal, and cook. We'd also check out books for him from the library, and when he finished one we'd spend the following night sitting fireside as he told us all about what he'd read. Henry became like a father to Justin and me, and that made me and Justin feel more like brothers. Justin was 16 when he told me his plan. I want to introduce Henry to my mom. What? Why? I asked. Maybe they'll hit it off. But your parents are still married. I know. I'm hoping if Mom meets Henry, she'll fall in love with him and leave my dad. You don't even know if Henry is her type. How can he not be? He's single and nice and way better than my dad. That don't mean she'll fall in love with him. It don't work that way, Justin. You even said that the only reason your mom got back together with your dad is because he had money. Henry doesn't have any money. Justin thumbed at the shark tooth necklace. Henry can show her that we don't need money to be happy. He can help her remember. Part of me didn't want it to happen because I wanted Henry to be my dad. I would have been jealous. But I also knew that Henry wasn't just living in the woods. He was hiding. For whatever reason, he didn't want to be found. That night there was an argument across the street. It was violent and it was loud. Glass was shattered and doors were slammed, and in the morning, Justin was gone. I'd gotten used to hearing from Justin every day. If I didn't see him, he'd call me over the walkie-talkie. This was the 90s. We weren't using cell phones. So I went to his house that following afternoon and knocked on the door. Something I was always hesitant to do. His dad answered and just looked at me. Is Justin home? I asked. No. I haven't seen him all day. His dad shrugged. Not my problem. But he's your son. Excuse me. I swallowed and said, Sorry, I meant that you'd know better than anyone else. Well, I don't. Before he shut the door, I noticed that the rug that was usually spread across the living room floor was gone, and there was a new hole in the wall about the size of a fist. That had me concerned, but I decided I'd check with Henry before telling my mom what I saw. So, I made the long walk through the woods alone to Henry's house. White smoke was billowing from the chimney as I arrived and knocked on the door. Henry opened it and said, Hey, Cole, come on in. I stepped inside and could smell that he was cooking a stew. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you're probably not going to want any of this stew, he said. How come? He lifted the pot off the stove and showed me. It's your spicy rabbit concoction. I smirked. No thanks. Well, if you change your mind, I have plenty of honey. Henry went back to stirring. Where's Justin? I was hoping he was here. Henry stopped stirring and looked at me. You can't find him? No. I haven't seen him all day. That's not like him. No, it ain't. But I heard his dad hollering last night, And when I went to his house a couple hours ago, there was a big hole in the wall and the living room rug was missing. And his dad said he ain't seen him all day. Henry sighed and sat on the bed. Have you told your mom? Not yet. I wanted to see if he was here first. Can you think of anywhere else he might be? I shrugged. No. He was planning on coming out here anyway. Without you. I don't know. Maybe. He wanted to try to get you to meet his mom. Henry furrowed his brow. Why? He thought if she met you, she might fall in love and leave his dad. Henry smirked and shook his head. Oh, Justin. That poor boy. I watched Henry for a moment, then asked, would you have married his mom? No, Cole. I don't know her, and even if I did, my marrying days are over. This is how I'm going to live until I die. Alone. Henry nodded. What do I do now? Henry stood up and took the pot off the stove, set it onto a cinder block, and tasted the stew. If you tell the police and Justin becomes a missing person, there will be search parties looking all up and down these woods. They'll find me. So, finding Justin is more important. I'm a wanted man, Cole. It was the first time I'd heard him admit it. He truly was an outlaw. What did you do? I asked. Henry put the spoon down and walked over to the bookshelf, pulled out his journal and removed the picture of the young boy and looked at it. His name was Sean, your son. I lied when I told you he was sick. He wasn't sick. He was murdered. A man took him when he was walking home from school. He took my son, locked him in a cellar, and tortured him until he died. Sean was only 10 years old. I'm sorry, Henry. I knew who did it, but the police thought differently. They said there wasn't enough evidence. But I knew without a shadow of a doubt it was him. So, I did what the police couldn't. I killed him. Henry turned and looked at me. And, for that reason, I can't let them find me. I was shocked that Henry was even capable of such a thing. Okay, then what do I do? Henry placed the photograph on the bookshelf and sat back on the bed. You need to either find Justin or find proof that his dad killed him. But you need to move quick, before someone files a missing person report. Justin's dad owned a contracting business. Some days he worked long hours, some days he barely worked at all. It was impossible to gauge when he would and wouldn't be home. So, the following morning I watched by my window until he left, and the second he did, I hurried across the street. The door was locked, as I figured it would be, but I knew the same couldn't be said about Justin's bedroom window. There had been plenty of times when Justin snuck out that window in the middle of the night and, likewise, I'd also snuck in a handful of times. The latch was broken. It was easy. I entered as quiet and careful as I could, and looked around Justin's room for any clues. It was messier than I remembered, and the door had been knocked off its hinges. But what stood out most to me was that his mattress was missing. Nothing else seemed out of place. I stepped into the hall and crept carefully toward the living room, keeping an eye out for Justin's mom as I went. The first thing I noticed was that the walls had more than one hole punched into them, and the furniture was all scattered about. It looked like Justin's dad had gotten into a fist fight with the room itself. Again, I noticed the missing rug, and knelt and smelled something like bleach, and as I looked even closer, saw what looked like 3 drops of blood. All the clues were pointing to the worst. I crept over to the kitchen and opened the fridge. Lots of beer. I closed it and looked at the counters. There was a knife missing from the wooden knife block. I was almost certain now, but I had to check 2 more spots, the garage and the master bedroom. The garage had a freezer, and my heart trembled at the thought of what I might find in it. First, I looked around behind tool chests and whatnot, and finding nothing, I walked over to the freezer. Please don't be in here, I whispered to myself, then lifted the lid. There wasn't anything inside but deer meat and ice cream. I sighed with relief. Then, all of a sudden, the garage door began to open. Without a second thought, I hurried back into the house and didn't get far before I was face to face with Justin's mom. She blinked at me a few times, then groggily said, "Hey, Cole, where's Justin?" At that moment, The interior garage door opened and Justin's dad stepped inside. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said. "I'm looking for Justin. He's not here." "I told you that already." "Where is he?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." His dad's eyes got big, and he said, "What are you trying to say?" "You killed him." "I know you did." "Boy, you better watch your mouth." "What's he talking about, Chris?" Justin's mom asked. "Shut the fuck up, woman." I backed up toward Justin's mom and said, "He killed Justin. And if you don't leave here, he's going to kill you, too." Chris pointed his finger at me and stepped closer. "I'll kill you, boy. That's who I'll kill if you don't get out of my house right now." Chris charged at me, and Justin's mom pushed me out of the way and screamed, "Get out of here, Cole." Then she pulled at Chris long enough for me to run out the front door, and whether that was enough, I don't know, because I just kept running without looking back until I reached the woods, and even then, I still hurried until I got to Henry's cabin. I didn't bother to knock on the door this time, and when I got inside, Henry wasn't there. It was quiet and everything was tidy. I sat on the bed and caught my breath and noticed that the rifle was gone. He must have been out hunting. I sat there a moment, waiting for him, and noticed the photograph of his son still sitting on the bookshelf from the previous night. It seemed dear to him, not something he liked to share. But I was curious, so I picked it up and got my first real look at the boy. He looked to be about 10, the age Henry said he was when he died. He didn't look much like Henry. He was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, whereas Henry had dark features. There was something about his smile that seemed forced. His eyes didn't look happy. In fact, he looked kind of scared. But there was something else. Something in the background that was out of place. It was Henry's cabin. That didn't make sense. Henry moved to the woods to escape the law, a law he didn't break until after his son died. How could his son have been here? I dropped the picture and pulled Henry's journal from the shelf and opened it. It wasn't a journal at all. It was a photo album, each page a photo of a different child. I felt the room start to spin. I had to leave before he came back. I turned around to go out the door and stopped. There he was, standing right in front of me. "Hi, Cole," he said. He looked at the book in my hand. "I see you looked at my journal." "I didn't look at it." "No? Oh, well, then let me show you." "That's okay. I've got to go." "Nonsense." Henry shut the door. "Stay a little while." Then he tapped the bed with the butt of his rifle and said, "Have a seat." Reluctantly, I set the book down and did as he asked. He stepped over to the bookshelf and picked up his journal, then sat next to me on the bed. He carefully opened it to the first page. "This is my collection, Cole. They're in ascending order by age. Page 1, you can see, is an infant, little baby Andy. Page 2 is 1-year-old Tessa." He flipped the page. 2-year-old Abigail, or Abby, as her parents like to call her. "Please, I don't want to see any more." Henry sighed and flipped a few pages to age 9, and next to it was a blank space. He placed the photo of the blonde-haired boy under age 10. Michael had gotten lost in the woods. "He found me, just like you and Justin." "Where is he?" "Justin? Oh, let me show you." Henry flipped past ages 11 through 15 and stopped on 16. It was a picture of Justin bound to a chair in a dark room. He was a fighter, I have to admit. I felt sick. Tears started to swell in my eyes. Justin had been betrayed by the man he trusted most, and at that moment I had not only lost my best friend, my brother, but I'd also lost another father. Now, Cole, don't cry. I'll let you see him. You can say goodbye. He's alive." Henry pointed at the floor. "He's down there." "Show me." Henry closed the book and stood, then lifted the deerskin rug, revealing a hatch door. He opened it, and a rotten odor lifted into the cabin. He motioned with his hand to the dark hole in the floor and said, "After you." I stood and looked down into the hole. I don't see anything. Henry reached under his bed and grabbed a flashlight and handed it to me. I shined it down the hole and could see a ladder descending about 20 feet to a dirt floor. "You go first," I said. Henry frowned. "Cole, whether you go down or not, I'm the one controlling this situation. I choose whether you live or die." I stared at him a moment, knowing what he said was true, and leaned over the hole and yelled, "Justin." No answer. "Why isn't he answering?" Henry shrugged. "Maybe he can't hear you." I couldn't take not knowing anymore, so I stepped to the ladder and descended. To my surprise, Henry followed. "Justin, you in here?" My feet touched the dirt floor, and I looked around the room with the flashlight. It was empty of all except a chair in the middle, and slumped over in the chair was Justin. I hurried over to him and lifted his head, and when I did, it fell back, and I could see that his throat had been cut, and the ground beneath him was sodden with blood. "Sorry, Cole. I needed 16. He trusted you. And were those 2 years not some of his best?" I looked at Justin's lifeless body, the shark tooth necklace, his symbol of hope, still hanging from his neck. "Are you going to kill me next?" "Well, I already have a 14. Henry opened the journal and took out the picture and looked at it for a moment. Then he tore it in half and said, "But it looks like I need a new one." He dropped the journal and rushed toward me, and right before he reached me, I yanked the necklace from Justin's neck and stabbed the shark tooth straight into Henry's eye. "Fuck," he cried, covering his face, blood seeping between his fingers. I sprinted past him and up the ladder, and before I got to the top, he grabbed a hold of my ankle. I kicked several times and managed to connect with his bloodied face, knocking him to the ground. Then I heaved myself up from the hole, slammed the hatch shut, and piled everything I could on top of it. I watched for a moment as he tried and failed to push through. Then I grabbed his rifle and took off for my house. The cabin was so far back in the woods that the police asked me to take them to it. My mom went with me, and around noon, we reached it. We stayed back as the police moved forward with guns drawn. But as they entered the cabin, I could see that the hatch was now open. They never found Henry. He left behind everything except his journal. I recently went back to the old neighborhood. Most of the houses have been sitting empty for over 20 years. I suppose people weren't comfortable with the idea that Henry might still be in those woods. And now that everyone is gone, nature has moved into all of their homes. All except for one. Justin's dad stayed, but not his mom. On the day of Justin's funeral, I gave her a gift. A necklace. One which reminded her of a happier time. In the woods is a spot where the cabin once stood. In its place, a cross memorializing where so many children lost their lives. Nobody knows for sure how many children died there. At least 6, as that's how many bodies were found buried in various spots around the cabin. Around the cross are several mementos placed there by loved ones, a toy car, a girl's hair ribbon, a teddy bear. But on the day I visited, I found something that sent a chill down my spine. A copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Inside was a handwritten message, which read, "See you soon, 38. Tomorrow will be my 38th birthday." Fourth story. Wendigo encounter. This is a repost. I had to fix some spacing errors. I am not sure if this is the right place to post this, but I am scared shitless. After hearing stories and looking stuff up online, I'm fairly sure it was a Wendigo. Me, my son, and girlfriend were attacked by something. We were camping up in the northernmost area of Washington. My girlfriend is incredibly superstitious, so she insisted we brought weapons. So I had my combat knife and a 12-gauge shotgun, and she brought a .22 rifle alongside a newly sharpened machete. Our son was just 3 years old at the time. She and I were set on edge from a park ranger, who seemed very tense and uneasy, who stopped us and instead of confiscating our weapons told us to be careful and stay safe, then sent us along our way to the camp. When we got there, we were informed that several visitors had spoken about some unnatural noises and a pale creature that would mimic voices and sounds of people who weren't talking or seeming to be distracted. I laughed and put the idea out my mind, thinking to myself, there's no way. They're fucking with us. but I knew better. So we then reached the area we were going to set up camp. We immediately got a fire ready to light and set up our tent and bags. I fed my son as my girlfriend ate a snack. We decided to get a lay of the area, so me and my girlfriend hiked around for about an hour or so. I had one of those baby-carrying backpacks, and my son started to get real heavy. Everything seemed normal until I saw something down the almost path we were on. We walked closer to investigate and saw drag marks. It looked as if someone had killed a buck. There was a hole outlined in the dirt with a small dried pool of blood, as if someone grabbed it from the antlers and pulled. That wouldn't be possible for any man to do. The buck, or whatever it was, would have been way too big for that. Shaken, we rushed back to base camp and restarted the fire and hurried back into our tent. Too afraid to leave since it was dusk by now, we stayed inside the tent and my girlfriend put our son to bed. Eventually, probably from the exhaustion of fright, we fell asleep. What must have been hours later, I awoke to a faint rasping sound that sounded like a child crying. I gazed outside in confusion and saw the outline of a creature that seemed to be a buck, standing over something. It seemed to be about 20 feet away, but at a closer glance had unnaturally long limbs for a buck and was eerily tall. In sudden fear, I unloaded 2 shots into the creature and heard a loud blood-curdling C or Y.M. My girlfriend awoke screaming to the shots I had fired as I tried to explain what I had heard. To my surprise, the animal hadn't moved an inch. Then I noticed the stains on the side of the animal. It looked like blood was running down the edge, and lots of it. It stared at me deep into my eyes as I became petrified with fear. A sinister feeling of dread fell over me as if it knew I couldn't move. I thought to myself, what if it starts to bolt towards us? Just then, this tall, decrepit demonic thing seemed to whisper something. I couldn't exactly tell what it was saying, but it seemed to have said, "I need more children." My girlfriend screamed, asking where our son was. We blacked out. In the morning, we awoke to park rangers at our campsite. We didn't see our son anywhere. We told the rangers that he was missing, and they started a search party. I explained what had happened, and strangely, they seemed to believe it. The one who seemed to be older by at least a decade pulled along the one we met earlier and whispered in his ear. I only heard a single line, and I'm not even sure if what I heard was correct. It sounded like he said, "It's getting bolder." They didn't seem to want us by ourselves, so they waited with us while they continued the search. We stayed in a log cabin for 3 days with a forest ranger, when suddenly some rangers came into the cabin saying they couldn't find our son. My girlfriend starts to sob. I start to hate myself, thinking that I could have done something if I wasn't frozen in fear. We rushed outside only to find some injured and frightened police officials. The rangers wouldn't tell us anything of what happened or what they saw, or why the cops were scared shitless. All we know is that we don't have a son anymore. God help whoever goes into that forest next, and please, please don't bring your kids with you. 5th story. The bitter winds howled through the dense pine forests of upstate New York, carrying with them an ancient and malevolent force. The small town of Ravens Hollow, nestled on the edge of Lake Ontario, had long been a haven for those seeking solitude and escape from the chaos of city life. Little did they know, a darkness had awakened in the heart of the Great Woods, a terror that would consume the town in a relentless nightmare. Chapter 1. The Haunting Silence. The first signs of unease manifested in the form of an eerie silence that draped Ravens Hollow like a funeral shroud. Birds ceased their melodic chatter, and the rustling leaves fell still as the nocturnal creatures retreated into the shadows. Whispers of strange sightings echoed among the townsfolk, glimpses of elongated shadows and haunting cries in the deep of night. Amelia, a local historian with a penchant for the supernatural, delved into the town's archives seeking clues about the origin of this ominous presence. She uncovered ancient tales of a Wendingo, a malevolent spirit that thrived on the suffering of those who dared to trespass into its realm. Chapter 2. Frozen Fingers of Fear. As winter tightened its grip on Ravens Hollow, the chilling whispers grew louder, and the temperature plummeted to unnatural lows. Residents reported seeing ghastly figures dancing at the edge of the woods, their eyes glowing like the frigid moon above. The once friendly townsfolk turned paranoid, casting accusing glances at each other, unsure of who among them might be possessed by the Wendigo's curse. Amelia, driven by an insatiable curiosity, ventured into the heart of the woods, guided by the cryptic tales of an old native elder. She felt the crunch of frost underfoot and the weight of unseen eyes watching her every move. The trees seemed to close in, their skeletal branches forming grotesque figures that pointed the way to an ancient burial ground. Chapter 3. The Dance of the Wendigo. Within the sacred burial ground, the air thickened with an otherworldly energy. An ancient totem stood at the center, adorned with bones of long-forgotten creatures. As Amelia approached, the temperature plummeted even further, and her breath formed ghostly clouds in the frigid air. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a monstrous creature emerged from the shadows, a grotesque fusion of human and beast, with antlers that scraped against the frozen branches. The Wendigo's eyes glowed with an insatiable hunger, and it let out a bone-chilling howl that reverberated through the woods. Amelia, paralyzed with terror, could only watch as the Wendigo began its haunting dance, a ritualistic performance that summoned the spirits of the damned. Shadows twisted and contorted, merging with the Wendigo in a macabre display of malevolence. Chapter 4. Descent into Madness. The once tranquil town of Raven's Hollow descended into chaos as the Wendigo's influence spread like a ravenous plague. Nightmares seeped into reality, and the townsfolk succumbed to madness, their minds shattered by the relentless whispers that echoed through the frozen air. Amelia, bearing witness to the town's unraveling, knew she had to find a way to break the Wendigo's curse. Armed with ancient knowledge and guided by the spirits of the past, she embarked on a perilous journey to confront the malevolent force that had ensnared Raven's Hollow. Chapter 5. The Battle in the Shadows. The final confrontation unfolded in the heart of the ancient burial ground. The air crackled with supernatural energy as Amelia faced the Wendigo, armed with a sacred talisman and the collective will of the tormented spirits. The forest itself seemed to recoil in anticipation. The battle between human and supernatural beast raged on, each step Amelia took sending tremors through the frozen ground. The Wendigo's howls echoed through the night, blending with the anguished cries of the spirits it had ensnared. With a surge of determination, Amelia raised the talisman high, channeling the power of the ancient spirits. The Wendigo writhed in agony as its malevolent essence was torn asunder. The burial ground echoed with a triumphant howl, and the shadows retreated, leaving behind a town forever scarred by the horrors of the Wendigo's haunting. Epilogue. The Lingering Shadows. Though the Wendigo was banished, Raven's Hollow remained forever changed. The townsfolk, scarred by the ordeal, carried the weight of the supernatural encounter. The ancient burial ground, now reclaimed by the spirits, stood as a solemn reminder of the thin veil that separated the living from the supernatural. As winter gave way to spring, the whispers of the Wendigo faded into a haunting memory. The Great Lakes region resumed its natural rhythm, but those who survived the terror of Raven's Hollow knew that the shadows of the Wendigo would forever linger in the frozen depths of the pine-scented woods. Sixth story. This story was shared by u/Silver Ink Blot V2. Wendigo. Norma Jean drew a heart on the back of my hand in hoop snake blood. When that fades, she said, tapping the center of her work, you may forget about me. Norma Jean and I dated on and off through high school and then some. We grew up wandering the forest and exploring the caverns surrounding Ripple Creek, running from the hide-behinds and hodags when we stumbled too far into their territory. The backwoods of Minnesota were our playground, from the shores of Loon Lake to the edge of Crazy Dan's property, where the pine trees grew so tall you couldn't see the sky. The day Norma Jean disappeared, I saw a teakettle scuttling around the shed behind my place. It walked backwards, like they do, and bumped right into the pile of what I spent all day chopping. Teakettlers don't ever stray so far from the woods. They're very shy. I had planned to see about trapping it the next day, show Norma Jean. Course, that didn't happen after all. I heard about Norma Jean the next morning on my way to the general store for a new axe. The axe handle hounds got mine. Bunch of people everywhere, conversing in little groups, tittering like birds. They all stopped talking when they saw me, shuffled away when I drew near. I didn't say anything. Something in their gaze made my voice feel as though it had rusted away. Finn was the one who pulled me aside. Said people hadn't seen hide nor hair of Norma Jean in 2 days. Bertie got worried after her car sat out on the road so long and called the cops. They went up to the Janies, and that's when they found the blood on the floor. Crazy Dan was already mumbling about hide-behinds to anyone who would listen. Not me. Norma Jean and I have been getting away from hide-behinds for years. Everyone's talking, but no one's actually saying anything. A lot of whispering about the Wendigo among the superstitious. More ordinary whispers from the less superstitious. One of the elders is a full-blooded Cree. I overheard a couple OL biddies asking for talismans. Lots of narrowed eyes my way. I don't know what to say. The cops already interviewed me. I dated Norma Jean, but so did Aaron, Spruce, Hunter, Alder, Flint. Norma Jean was a pretty gal, milk-white skin, sky blue eyes, corkscrew blonde hair. Any guy'd be lucky to have her on his arm. No one in Ripple Creek has slept easy lately, not with this hanging over our heads. I've had to buy 2 more axes in the last 4 weeks. I keep leaving them outside. The axe handle hounds must love me. I hear them barking the nights I forget to put my axe away, excited to have a free meal. Norma Jean would have laughed at me if she were still here. The thought brings the metallic taste of sorrow to my tongue. I remembered it in a dream, when Norma Jean and I went to Loon Lake Cemetery. There's no road out there anymore. You have to hike through the woods and over swampland that's just as likely to suck you down as it is to let you pass. Norma Jean always had a thing for the supernatural. They say there are 3 witches buried in that graveyard. If you step over one of their graves, they will come for you. 2 of the headstones are near the grove. The 3rd is missing. You really think there's a witch buried here? The weathered tombstones are nearly unreadable in the weak beam of my flashlight. Maybe Norma Jean rests on her haunches, tracing a finger over a name more than a century gone. Her blonde corkscrew hair is silver under the moon. She turns to me with a crooked smile. Are you afraid? The place did give me the shivers, even in my dream. But I wasn't afraid. No. She smiles a little wider. There are too many teeth in her mouth. Are you sure? I woke up with a pounding heart and a lump in my throat. My mouth tasted like blood, and I can't seem to scrub the feeling away. Mostly I just try to forget the whole thing. Forget I ever dated Norma Jean. It's all right most of the time. I chop and sell wood, and another winter passes. Then I see the hoop snake blood hard on the back of my hand, and it all rushes back. The blonde corkscrews. Norma Jean and me. The hide-behinds and hodex. Norma Jean and Flint. The late nights and long hikes. Norma Jean and Alder. The axe handle hounds, swallowing my axe whole. 7th story. This story was shared by you/Dokum. Even though I solo hiked the Pacific Crest Trail back in 2019, I wasn't always alone. In April of 2019, I decided to solo hike the Pacific Crest Trail. It had been a dream of mine ever since watching the movie, Wild. Anyway, after much planning, I finally began my journey on April 30th in Campo, California. Now, I estimated that it would take me about 6 months or so to complete the trail, with my final destination being Canada. On the first day of my hike, I managed to walk 25 miles despite the desert heat, which was an accomplishment for me. The further I hiked the PCT, though, is when I noticed just how beautiful yet dangerous the desert could be. I nearly stepped on some rattlesnakes on the trail. Anyway, it was my 53rd day on the trail when I finally reached the famous Kennedy Meadows. I decided to rest up there for a few days, 0 days, before heading back onto the trail again. Several days later, I felt invigorated and was back on the trail. It was about a week after leaving Kennedy Meadows when inexplicable things began to happen to me. It was around Yosemite National Park when I noticed I was being followed. Now, there are other hikers and even wildlife on the trail, but this felt different, and so, as a female hiker, I had to be cautious. I found myself walking even faster, and according to my GPS, there was a campsite nearby. It was about 20 minutes later when I finally reached the campsite. I breathed a sigh of relief when I noticed there were several other hikers there too. Feeling exhausted, I decided to camp there for the night. After setting up my tent, I had something to eat before going to sleep. Around 11 p.m., I was awoken by someone or something calling my name. At first, I thought it was a dream that was until I heard it again. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. Anyway, the next few days on the trail were without incident. That all changed though on my 56th day on the trail, when I somehow managed to twist my ankle, which forced me off the trail for a few days. Since I was 20 miles or so from the nearest town, I decided to find a campsite and rest up until my ankle felt a little better. After I found my campsite, I pitched my tent and laid down for a bit. When I finally woke up, it was already dark outside. What made it even scarier was the fact that I was alone at this campsite. Although I was feeling apprehensive, I had no choice but to stay. At this point, I had forgotten about the voice I had heard several days ago, but that was about to change. Anyway, I was hungry, but after my meal of beans and rice, I began to feel drowsy again and decided to lie down. As I was about to fall into a deep sleep, I heard someone shout, "Please help me. Kim, please help me. Kim, please help me, Kim," in rapid succession. The voice was the same one from 3 days earlier, which unnerved me even more because I was certain now this person or thing was stalking me. Despite knowing this, though, I still wanted to see who or what it was terrorizing me. I slowly unzipped my tent, and as I was opening the flap, I heard a scream. My heart began to pound. Using my flashlight, I scanned the nearby woods and saw a figure standing off in the distance. I couldn't make out any features, but it was humanoid in shape. "Who are you?" I shouted. "Who are you?" It replied. "What do you want? What do you want?" Now, it was clearly mocking me, and at this point, I was really scared. With nowhere to go, though, I decided to stay in the safety of my tent until morning. While I was sitting there, I could hear it circling my tent, which lasted for an hour or so. Right at the crack of dawn, I quickly packed up my gear, even though my ankle was still hurting. As I was packing up, I noticed several sets of footprints surrounding my tent, except these weren't human, confirming my worst fears. Anyway, I somehow managed to make it to the nearest town, where I stayed for about a week in order for my ankle to heal. Despite my frightening experience, though, I eventually got back onto the PCT and finally made it to Canada without another incident, although I was still being followed. As soon as I got back home, I did some research, and the results I got were about skinwalkers and the Wendigo. Now, I'm not saying what I experienced on the PCT was supernatural. I'm a skeptic, but who knows what's real and what's not. Anyway, to those of you who are thinking about hiking the PCT, my story isn't intended to discourage you from hiking it, but rather it's a cautionary tale about the potential dangers on the trail. Stay safe, everyone, and happy hiking. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.